How's it going, people? Used car prices are really high right now as a result of the chip shortage and supply chain issues we've been having over the past couple of years that I spoke about in a previous video I made about 4 months ago. In that video, I said that it's highly unlikely that prices will burst down back to a previous pre-pandemic level, and also that we probably wouldn't see any kind of proper decreasing in price until around about 2025. Go watch that video if you haven't already, but basically I said that I hope to see prices drop sooner, but it's really dependent on the chip shortage and all that kind of stuff. However, I've been reading some articles recently from very senior executives at manufacturers and at dealerships as well, basically saying that we might never see prices of used cars or new cars dip down to pre-pandemic levels. So what are they saying, and are they correct? Let's have a look at it in this video. Do hit the like button if you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe as well if you're new, and let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on what they have to say and on what I have to say too. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So why might prices never dip as low as they once were? Both car dealerships and manufacturers are saying some pretty punchy stuff that is well worth considering. The CEO of one of the largest car dealerships in the US, AutoNation, mentions to Bloomberg that as manufacturers have been able to drive bigger profits by selling less inventory at higher prices, they're incentivized to continue to throttle demand, even if they do return to levels of supply that they can match demand. This was confirmed by executives at General Motors and Ford, who said that even if we go back to pre-levels of supply and chip shortage and blah 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 blah, they will continue to keep the demand high by making a lower supply. Just to explain this in simple terms, what they're basically saying is that in the past, cars that most people would buy, the average everyday car, is a volume game. Manufacturers make as many cars as they think that they can sell based on past sales and future projections. Then they'll try and sell out of as many of them as they can, and if they sell out completely, they might even add more just to fill up the demand. The idea here is to outsell your competitors, get the cars to the consumer faster, quicker, cheaper, and keep margins low but the numbers very high. Ideally, you don't want to have loads left at dealerships at the end of the year, but it's not the end of the world because you can just discount the prices even more and then get rid of them. When you're selling in volume, you're not that worried about the amount of profit you make per car. You just want to sell as many cars as possible, get them all out of the door and take as much of the market share as possible. And then you make all of your money on the fact that you sold 10 million cars or something stupid. Obviously, that's not realistic. You sold 10 million cars, and then each of those is giving you a very small profit, which makes a nice big figure at the end of the year. Instead, what the manufacturers and dealerships are saying is that there's going to be a focus on selling to a bigger margin, so less volume but more money made per car. So let's make it super simple. Let's say that a company sells 100,000 cars with $1 profit. Of selling those 100,000 cars, they have made £100,000 in profit. Instead, let's say that company sells that same car, but instead of selling 100,000, they sell 10,000, and they do it with a £10 profit per car. They will still make the £100,000 that they made with the 100,000 cars. Of course, I'm massively oversimplifying at this point, but you should get the idea. The reason why they think they can do this is because people are already spending well over the odds for cars, whether they are new or used. According to some research done by Edmunds, in January 2022, 80% of cars that were sold above list price. So because manufacturers and dealerships can't keep up with the supply and there's so much more demand, people are paying over the top to get their cars. So we know that demand for cars is there. As long as you keep your supply in check, you can make sure that demand stays, charge more for your cars, etc, etc, etc. That would then filter down to the used car market because one, there are fewer used cars in the market because there are fewer being made new in the first place, and then also prices start higher in the first place and therefore they have much further that they have to fall to reach those older previous values. So does this mean that we will be stuck with super high prices even after supply chain and chip shortage issues are resolved? I personally don't think so. At least not for those reasons. And I actually have a few questions around how they think this is going to work in terms of basic economics and also just competition. In order for manufacturers to achieve a situation where they could keep a low supply of their cars and therefore have a really high demand, they would either have to all independently agree that's what they're going to do, or come together as a group and say, yeah, actually guys, let's maintain a low level of supply to keep that demand nice and high, and then we can get bigger profit margins. Because otherwise, if BMW, Ford, General Motors and Stellantis all decide they're going to do exactly that and they're going to keep their supply low and keep that demand high, what's to stop Mercedes, Hyundai, blah blah blah, all those guys getting involved and saying, well great, there's all of this demand, let's just fill it with supply. If other manufacturers are making there be more demand in the market and they're not filling that demand, then other companies companies can come along and take that demand. As rational actors, they see a whole bunch of demands being made and not being fulfilled, and therefore they come along, offer some nice low prices and an unlimited resource of all of those items, and they kill the demand, first of all, for those other companies, so they'll have to drop their prices and whatever, and ultimately they win as well because they take out a whole bunch of extra cash just made for them by someone else. So if someone's going to buy a BMW for £70,000 and BMW are keeping their supply nice and low to keep that demand high, Mercedes come along and say, great, we'll offer basically the exact same car, just obviously with a Mercedes badge on it and slightly different, but the same basic idea, sell it for 60k instead and sell as many of them as we fancy, and oh, there you go, everyone decides they're going to buy the Mercedes instead because it's exactly the same offering ultimately as the BMW. Why not just go and buy it? And that has a double whammy of affecting BMW because now the demand is gone, they've got these super expensive cars, they're not going to make the same amount of money off of them, and they've made fewer cars in total, so they're going to suffer. Hopefully that makes some sense to you. Simply put, I don't think that most brands are going to risk losing their market share for the sake of keeping their prices high. There's another line of argument as well which says that brands will benefit from this from a brand value perspective by limiting supply. They look more premium first of all, and second of all, at the end of the year there aren't a whole bunch of random cars they need to discount to sell, which erodes brand value because you're selling off a whole bunch of cars at less than you wanted for them, which tells people that the cars are not worth what you wanted for them. I would agree in general for premium brands that is definitely a problem. You don't want to erode your brand value by saying to consumers that actually when we said a Mercedes was worth 100 grand and we sold it for 70 grand because we couldn't get rid of it, that therefore it wasn't worth the 100 grand in the first place. You really want to make sure that your cars are selling for the prices that you asked for them. But that really doesn't apply to the vast majority of the market because the vast majority of the market isn't premium cars. Why would a budget brand be worried about their cars being considered as budget? So long as budget doesn't come with the connotations of badly made or cheap and nasty or whatever it is, if it's just budget because they are like decently priced and reasonably priced and all that kind of stuff, then that's kind of what they want, isn't it? Of course, there will be some level of discount that they don't want. So like, you don't want to be putting a car up for 10 grand and then selling it for 3 grand. It does look like it's a bit much. But if they want to sell it for 10 grand, they sell it for 7 grand or whatever. Like at the end of the year, it's not the absolute end of the world to someone like VW or Hyundai or whatever, because like to them, that's just like they sold the car. And the reason why it's not being a problem is because they are inherently volume-based brands. They are not on margin, they are on volume. Of course, either way, it cannot be a race to the bottom in terms of price, but it doesn't have to be. And it definitely doesn't have to be if a whole bunch of brands are saying they're not going to reduce their prices, so they're not even in the race anymore. You can easily undercut those brands with basically the same offerings and taking a slightly less big margin. It's madness. Do these execs not understand simple economics or the simple idea of competition? I don't get it. Maybe I'm the dumb one. I may well be. Let me know in the comments down below. The best things come in threes apparently, so this is kind of a clarifying third and final point. I think the prices of some used cars are far less likely to drop than some other ones, but I think that because their value is a key part in the reason why people buy them. I don't mean that as in like they're cheap and so people buy them because their value is cheap. I mean they buy them because they want that value of the car and they want to maintain that value of the car. So I could be talking about classic cars or modern cars that enthusiasts love and therefore have put a price tag on to own, those kinds of cars. In fact, the Alfa Romeo 4C, which I am after at the moment, is one of those cars. Back in like end of 2019 into the middle of 2020, they were available from around about 30 to 35,000 pounds. I even made a video on one at 35,000 pounds. That same Alfa 4C today costs around 45 to 50,000 pounds. I would obviously love for them to return to their 30 to 35,000 pounds mark, but I really don't think that will happen because any 4C owner that has bought over the last 2 years and spent 45,000 pounds on the car or whatever will believe that the car is worth 45,000 pounds. And yes, obviously a car is only worth what people are going to pay for it, but there is a significantly limited supply of Alfa Romeo 4Cs, which will probably only go down as people sawn them or crash them, and people start to become accustomed to the actual value of those cars. The value is going to go up, it's not really likely to go down unless something crazy happens in the world whereby we're no longer allowed to drive internal combustion engine cars or something like that. No one who spends 45 grand on a 4C as an investment, like a fun investment to drive but also to invest in and keep, is going to want to sell it for anything less than they paid for it. Unless they put shed loads of miles on it, turn it into a bit of a rat or whatever it is, they're really not going to want to sell for less than they paid, because that car is a valuable car for other reasons. Obviously that's not applying to every single car. If it's something like, I don't know, like even just a premium car from a different brand, like let's say a BMW 3 Series or BMW M3, I can't tell you whether the price is going to stay high, because yes, people do love those cars for their value, but also there's a very consistent and continuing supply of new versions of the car and that kind of stuff, so it's a little bit more difficult with those ones. But like the one-off valuable cars, it's hard to suggest that they're going to drop in price. So other than that final point around cars with like inherent value, this has basically been me disagreeing with what manufacturers are saying, at least in terms of why they think that cars might not fall in price. If I was a car manufacturer, the CEO of a car manufacturing company, what I would try to do instead is take the fact that people are becoming more accustomed to higher prices of cars and then keep the prices that high and maintain the same volume. That would make the most sense, because as people become more accustomed to paying those prices for cars, they're gonna keep paying those prices for cars. If this shortage in chips and the supply chain issues carries on through to like 2025, we'll have been doing these prices for like 5 years. People aren't just going to suddenly be like, oh yes, now we're gonna go back to 2019 prices. Times change. So I would carry on playing the volume game, and I would also keep prices high. That's just me being a scumbag person in capitalism. That's just how it works. So saying they're going to try and artificially create demand in a situation where you're in competition with other people, the moment that starts hitting your bottom line and you realize that people are outselling you and they are making more money than you because you are creating demand for them to take, you're pivoting. But what are your thoughts? That's just how I feel about the situation. I don't know whether car prices will go up or will go down or whatever they'll say. This is just literally a whole bunch of my opinions based on the research that I've done and my background in politics and economics. And my cat has just climbed onto my PC. Wait, check this out. What are you doing, mate? Come on. What's going on? Why are you up there? Come back down, mate. I don't even know if I'm in shot now, but anyway, as I said, definitely let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this and whether you think that prices... Whoa, my cat is going wild. And what you think will happen to used car prices over the next few years. Obviously, more than happy to disagree with me, just make sure you keep it respectful. I hope you enjoyed this video either way. If you did, make sure you subscribe for more weekly car content and hit the like button, as I would really appreciate it and it helps the video out. As always, a massive thanks to the patrons for their support and to you guys as well for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.